Okay. I'm recording to the cloud because it's on my computer. It does nobody any good. Um, okay, done. Um, so the next thing is that you identify your allies. So you get your information together. The information is about the policy, underlying the policy. And if you're advocating for implementation, part of the information is where is it being implemented well, where isn't it being implemented well, what are the barriers to implementation. And then you want to look at who's supporting it, who's opposed to it. You also want to identify allies, people who have the same, or organizations that have the same or overlapping concerns as involved in this policy. These are not necessarily people or organizations that agree with you or your organization on everything, but on the policy you're advocating for they agree or they're close to agreeing, and you want to get them involved. You want to identify the key policymakers. Who can decide on this? Who can make a difference in doing whatever it is you're advocating for? And you want to, this is, people forget this one. You want to look at who the key opponents are, what organizations are opposing it, and what are their arguments. Because part of your information and part of your pitch, which is the next thing, is to undercut or show why those arguments are not effective. And I want to say in the pitch, you want to do the pitch that is um, that not only talks about the policy you're interested in or the practice that you're interested in, but also you want to do it in a way that is convincing. And part of convincing is to know who's going to oppose it and on what grounds. And I would say that when you're doing that, you may know the people who are opposing it. You may know who they are, and you may find them awful in many ways. You don't address that in your pitch. In your pitch, you're talking about the policy and the arguments for the policy, and you're trying to undercut the arguments, not the people. As soon as you get into people on this stuff, you go down a path that is not a good path to go down, because you never know. Oh, I'm sorry, I have an itch in my nose, so it's going to happen a number of times. When you prepare your pitch, you want it to be both pithy, that is, you don't want to, more than goes into that. You want to leave some of the details, the weeds, out. You want to go to the main points in your pitch. Use the weeds to answer questions, use the details to answer questions, or in the follow-up. But in the pitch itself, we talk about an elevator pitch for getting a job. That's 3 minutes that you can do in the elevator. This can be a little bit longer, but it shouldn't be forever. It shouldn't have every detail about it. It should be it's the bullet points, actually. And you have to, and that's hard to do. And I'm going to say that carefully. It's hard to do. There's an old, I think it was Mark Twain, who said, I'm writing you a long letter because I don't have time to write a short one. Well, getting your pitch down to the bullets is harder than writing every detail. So it takes time. And I would argue that, I would suggest that when you're going to do advocacy, you actually write something first, even if you're presenting it orally. You have something written, because that organizes your thoughts more carefully, and then figure out the bullet points, because that even more organizes your thoughts more carefully. And then the last step is to take action. So there's a lot that happens before you actually are out in the world advocating. You're preparing. These are the preparing steps. And you don't want to go out there without being well prepared. Okay. So here's one of the, this is also part of why advocate, actually. You advocate, you engage in advocacy, and successful advocacy strengthens the coalitions that you're building around whatever the issue is. One fact of life is when people act, they become more committed to something. If you can, people who just say, yeah, I like it, they like it, but or not. I mean, then they go on to something else. But if you get people involved in the advocacy, they become more committed, they and their organizations, to this idea, policy that you're interested in. It also helps you identify during this successful advocacy, you now know what policymakers are easy to talk to and are going to be supportive of this policy, but maybe of others that you're interested in later. So you've identified people you can go to, your go-to policymakers. I'll give an example, both on the city level and on the congressional level. This is so on the city level, working on a number of issues, it's pretty clear to me that on almost any issue I have a concern about, there are a few city council members I can go to and say, I really think you should be supporting this. I mean, I'll list them in, this is not necessarily in the order of their, either their influence on city council or their, I don't know, their clout, their, or their sympathy. But these are the people with whom and we'll talk about building relationships later, I have a strong relationship with. So the first is Vice Mayor Richardson. He and I have been through a number of struggles, including back when he was chief of staff to an earlier council member. So it goes back a long way. Mary Zendejas, and Karen has a really good relationship with her, and we can go to her on a lot of issues. Roberto Uranga, and that's really based on my long relationship with his wife more than anything else. But he's good. He's good, and I can go talk to him and have honest conversations. And he's generally on the side I am. And then, there are a couple of new city council members who, Cindy Allen, I'll talk about that in building relationships. But the real reason, the real success of your advocacy is that you have the positive policy results that you want. And that's seldom, and I'm going to say this, everybody wants 100% of what they want. You seldom get 100% of what you want. But if you got 80% of what you wanted in your advocacy, that's success. You've had a positive policy result. And we can, we've been working on inclusionary housing for how many centuries, Karen?
Oh gosh, over 15 years.
And the inclusionary housing policy passed is not perfect. We could talk about the flaws in it, but there is an inclusionary housing policy that can be built on in the city of Long Beach. And I will say the example of somebody's waiting to be admitted. I've got to admit somebody. The example of you can go back. There's another person I'm admitting. This is taking. And the example of a policy that the policy, the first time it was passed, what was passed in a more limited way than we wanted is the project labor agreement. And in the first project labor agreements are agreements that there will be in any new building sponsored by that city money is involved in, because the city has to be involved to have any cloud. Any projects that the city money is involved in, there will be union participation and hiring of disadvantaged people who are, these are usually skilled trade jobs, and the skilled trade unions have not actually been great with people of color around for the centuries that they've existed. But this says that first choices go to that hiring. The first PLO, and so the first PLA agreement that we got was pretty good, except that in defining the population to be the first choice, the building trade said that it included both all of Los Angeles County and Orange County, which wasn't what we wanted. But we got PLA. The second one that was just passed is Long Beach, which is what we wanted. But once you have the statement there, the first statement, which wasn't bad, we could work on that for the next one to get a better project labor agreement for all the whatever building's going to come, or whatever projects are going to come. Okay, in order to be successful, you have to do all those steps, but one of the things that you have to have going is building a relationship with policymakers. If you walk in the first time with demands and they don't know who you are or why you're there or what, if you're writing a letter cold, whatever you're doing, we'll get to the ways you can advocate. It's like they'll add. So all those phone calls you do to your congressman, all they do is check off how many are on this side or that side. But if you build a relationship with them, they are more apt to talk with you, hear you, pay attention to you, listen or read what you're saying. So that involves a number of things. One is working with the policymakers on their issues as well as yours. And I don't mean the issues that you disagree with, but ones that are not high on your priority list, that are high on their priority list. These are things that you say, okay, this would be good. I don't mind this. But it matters a lot to you. I will help you with it. And therefore, you're starting to build a relationship, which when it's not quite a quid pro quo, but when you go back in, they know you and they know you're somebody they can count on for help on various things. And that's true with your allies as well. You're building relationships with your allies. So you work on their issues as well as yours. So my sort of a central issue in my advocacy all my life, from my at least high school days. I'm admitting somebody. Being a host is hard. So from my high school days has been around peace issues. But some of my ally organizations have other issues of primary importance to them, though they're good on peace issues, but that's not their central focus. Well, I actually agree with them on their other issues, but again, my day has 24 hours, as does theirs. So it's not my top priority, but they can count on me for help on some key issues of theirs. Again, not the high energy help I put into my central issues, but some level of help. And then with your relationship building, it's continuous communication. It is, you don't, it's multiple contacts, not one and done. It's not, I'm going in, I'm going to meet with you, and then you'll never hear from me again. It is being there, being with them. You build the relationship again in lots and lots of different ways. With Congressmember Lowenthal, for example, we go back to 40 years. We don't like to say that, you know, but and it is, I'm in touch with him frequently, and sometimes about issues, sometimes just to check in and see how he's doing. When there was the insurrection in the Capitol, I actually I have I have his home email and his home phone number. Well, I think it's his cell. But and I sent him an email and said, I hope you're all right. And he actually called me back a couple of days later. And, you know, you just keep the conversation going, and he knows that if he needs help on some issues, I'll be there. I expect him, he and I actually don't agree on everything. You need to know that. We have a series, a disagreement around Middle Eastern issues that we have talked about for a long time. And he's moved some. I don't think I've moved. But he's moved some on those issues. And it is an ongoing conversation that we have, and an ongoing push that we've got, that, you know, that I give on him. But it's also based on a relationship of trust. And part of building the relationship actually is to assume good intentions. So even when we disagree, and I can say this about the city council members who I have the good relationship with, even when we disagree, and I have colleagues who jump to, they must have taken oil money. And I don't assume that. I assume good intentions, because these are people who basically are on my side on many of the peace and justice issues. And I need to be shown that it's not good intentions. But I do, even in disagreement, and that helps build the relationship. And I assume, I've never asked them, but I assume they assume good intentions on my part when we have disagreements. Again, I go back to the first project labor agreement, which was not what I was part of a group advocating for. I also understand why they came down the way they did. And they, you know, I pushed on it. I pushed on it afterwards, but I didn't push on it like you sellouts. I just pushed on what I wanted to do in a more positive way. But the continuous, and I don't want to say constant, because if you're constant, you can be a pain in the butt, but at least continuous contacts, multiple contacts, through a variety of means. And we'll talk about the means to advocacy. But
There's a question
yeah.
From Nico. Can working with one policymaker help with contacting and building a relationship with another policymaker?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm going to talk about that. You know, one of the things, if you have a meeting, one of the things you want to ask in the meeting is, who else should I contact? And can I use your name when I contact them? Because that's helpful. And then you can start building other relationships. And the one and done is not only multiple contacts with one person, it's multiple contacts with a number of people. You want, and that works. And yes, Nico, that's a very good question. And yes, working closely with one policymakers can be helpful in building relationships with other policymakers. First of all, and this is the cynical part, if in fact, so everybody knows that I have a relationship with Congressmember Lowenthal, and that I'm a good worker in a campaign. I used to be able to do door to door a lot. I'm not quite as able to do that, but I do a lot of work in a campaign. And so if 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 Alan says, if I can use his name contacting somebody else, they know that the cynical part is, oh, well, if I talk to her, she may work for me on my next election. And that is true. Again, the effort may not be as great as the effort on my core issues, but at least there'll be some effort there. And I have to say, building relationships with one policymaker helps expand your ability to build relationships with other policymakers. And it just works that way. Oh, it's not the right one. This works differently than the old way. Okay, so there are lots of ways to advocate. And some are lower level, lower energy requirements. So you can write letters to policymakers and to media outlets. And you can organize campaigns of writing letters and to policymakers. I want to say that by and large, letters, first of all, they have to be email now. And this has to do with the fact that all mail has to go to a central place and be decontaminated. Postal mail has to go to a central place and be decontaminated now, and it takes forever to get to the policymaker. So it's emails to them, and actually, and so that they kind of count. It is a low effort. People send out all the time. You'll send a letter to your congressman. Here's some text you can use. And sometimes all you have to do is press a button. And in fact, that's about as much effort as you should put into it, because all that happens at the congressional end is that they count. We got 254 and 150 against. And that they take that into consideration. More effective actually is letters to the editor. That if you're going to write letters to a letter writing campaign to media outlets is more effective than to your policymakers, but neither of those has a lot of clout. It's good. What it does, though, is the part of the letter writing that's good is that it can engage some people. You can identify some people for more action or better action later if they'll write letters. And you can count and you can say, oh, Jane Smith responded to this. Maybe I should call her about the next thing we want to do, and act on that as an advocate. Another way to advocate is public events. Public events have a lot of positive possibilities. So, and they can be anything. They can be a picketing. They can be a teach-in. We're doing a COVID teach-in next week. But they can be the teach-ins. I'm going to show my age, but the teach-ins on the Vietnam War actually helped build the anti-war movement and got attention from policymakers about how many people were interested in that problem. They couldn't put it aside and sort of let it go on its own way and continuing. So a public event is another way to advocate. And again, there are lots of different ways to have public events. You think about big rallies, that's important. But also smaller events that are well publicized. And the thing about the public event is not only do you get people together and show clout on the issue, but it does get press coverage, or it can, if you work it right, you can get press coverage for it. And that helps build whatever's advocacy for what you're concerned about. You can make telephone contact. And again, telephone contact tends to be a lower effort issue, a lower effort way of going about advocacy. And in general, it is counted. They just count. Okay, we got 150. Well, there's one thing is that there's high interest in this issue. And then more people are for it or than are against it. It doesn't help really convince anybody, but it does show the interest, and it may cause people to think about it. And I will give the example that's made a difference to some extent now. We've been in a proxy war in Yemen for a number of years. We have not had any troops on the ground. When you don't have troops on the ground, it's hard to organize anti-war efforts. What we're doing is funding the Saudis to buy the drones that are killing in Yemen. And we had serious phone contacts around that, serious way of getting a lot of people to call. We did do one of those write your congressman kind of letter writing campaign. I don't think that the Congress people even, it wasn't on their radar as an issue. It got on their radar as an issue through those concerns. Again, if they don't have to go to funerals of guys and gals in their district, it's hard to make it an issue. It can only be an issue. Again, this is the War and Peace. It can only become an issue if they know their constituents are concerned. And so these low-level things actually at least raise interest in the topic. And in fact, we've made some difference over time on policy toward the Saudis. I have to say this has to do with the election as much as anything else, but there was congressional action taken even before the election. So these things are not, the phone calls and the writing are neither sexy nor have major impact most of the time, but they can raise attention to an issue, and then you go in and do something else. And then the last thing is in-person meetings. Go see well, now you don't go see anybody, but have a Zoom meeting with with the policymakers. And we'll talk about the in-person meeting next, but that is very effective if you can spend time with a policymaker on an issue, and they know, first of all, you can educate them if it's not central to them. They know there's enough concern among some of their constituents who will take time out of their lives. Remember, they know we have lives. And so it's probably the most effective way of having policy action take place. Okay, let's see. Well, you have to press the right button. Okay, so meeting with a policymaker. And this is the one that I obviously spend a lot of time on. You can see there's much more on. And so you schedule time at their convenience or around an event. We used to go to Washington. And so we'd schedule time in Washington around the event. You know, there'd be these big demonstrations in Washington. We would schedule time around that event. But it's also at their convenience. So you call their scheduler and you figure out a good time for you and them. And if in fact they're not very flexible about time, you get very flexible about time. You change your life to meet their needs to the extent that you can. You want to make that part of it easy on them. You don't want to be the pain that says, I can only meet on Thursday at 10 o'clock. You figure it out, Congress member Lowenthal. You don't want to be that person because, well, I know him personally, and I know that would set his teeth on edge. You also have to figure out your ask. What is it you want from the policymaker? What is it you want? Now, I'm going to stop there. This is when you're advocating. When you're building the relationship, you may have a meeting. I've got a meeting scheduled next week, no, 2 weeks, I guess, with one of the new council members. There are 3 of us going. Our agenda, she knows what our agenda is in a big way, but our agenda for that meeting is that she knows we're out there, we're watching, we're listening, we're concerned. We want her to be a good, we want her to be on our side on the issues. And it's just for her, she doesn't know us. We don't really know her. That's our ask. We don't have a real ask out of that meeting. Our ask is, when we have a concern, can we come to you? But if you have a policy that you're concerned about, figure out your ask. Figure out what it is you want done. Do you want them to sign on to a bill? Do you want them to vote for a bill? Do you want them to initiate some legislation? Do you want them to direct some kind of study? You have to figure out your ask. And then the other thing I want to say, and I have been in both kinds of meetings, when you go, have a topic you're going on. I actually withdrew from a meeting. This is a number of years ago with a guy, and it was with Lowenthal. And I called him and told him I wasn't coming. And I think he knew, he gave the meeting partly because he saw my name on the list, but that's okay. It was the day before. And I could not convince the guy who organized it had a list of 10 things he wanted out of that meeting. Well, you can't do that. You may be interested in 10 things or 20 things or whatever, but if you're going to the meeting, first of all, they're going to give you at most 45 minutes, usually less. So you want to be able to be convincing about one, if you stretch it, 2 related topics, but don't go beyond that. It doesn't work. First of all, they tune out. And that's sort of communication 101. You have to stay on topic. And then, so you want to, but remember the bottom line really is the ask. What is it you want to have done? And that can be very specific, should be very specific. You have to prepare. So your preparation is gathering all the information about the issue and on the policymaker's position on that issue and on related issues. Remember, your job is to convince. So if you know that he or she has never taken a position on this issue, but there are 5 issues that are sort of in the same ballpark that they have taken positions on. You want to know that because in trying to convince them, you make the link. Don't leave it for them to make the link. If in fact I'm thinking about some voting rights issues, because partly that's what I've been teaching a little bit about in my senior citizen classes. If you're thinking about voting rights issues and what you're really, and I'll use Lowenthal, when he was in the state legislature, he was the key behind our citizens redistricting commission in the state. And given gerrymandering has a lot to do with voting rights. I'm sure he's good on voting rights. I'm not arguing that he isn't. But if you had a specific bill you wanted him to get behind related to voting rights, you could use the issue of gerrymandering to get there and get him on, because we know he's concerned about that. We know he's been concerned about that. If you're going with a group, make sure people know what they're going to talk about on what aspect of the issue. You don't want to be all over each other in the group. You want to have a clear leader on each kind of subtopic on this bigger topic that you're doing. So somebody is presenting the data and somebody is presenting the ask. And you're all in agreement on what they are. And anticipate the questions. Anticipate what those concerns are. That's part of gathering the information. Figure out, and that means gathering the information on opponents. That's where the opponent information comes in, because those will tell you where the questions and concerns lie. Whether your policymaker has the same ones or not, it's good to have that in your head before you go in. And be flexible within the meeting. When you're in the meeting, if something happens or the policymaker asks you about a different topic, you have to be, or a related topic, you have to be flexible in answering it, but answer that as quickly as you can and move back to what you've got. You know, I'm so glad you asked me that question. I think it's very important. And here's where I stand. I haven't consulted the group about it, but here's where I stand on it. But without what we're here about, that question, but without acting on what we're here about, we won't get to this big issue. So, you have to be flexible about it. And I will say, that's, while you're in the meeting. And if in fact the policymaker is you've got 5 sub-issues and the policymaker is only interested in one of them, go with it. Just go with it. And you ask them, even if they come down on your side, what additional information would be helpful? Because remember, they're one vote. And they may be trying to convince some of their colleagues. So what could we do to help you? What additional information? Or if they're iffy about it, about your issue, your concern, ask what information would help move them off the fence. And then ask who else you should contact. That's sort of Nico's question here. And again, that has multiple things. First, multiple effects. One is that you have another person to contact to talk to about the policy you're most concerned about. And the second part is that taking action piece. As soon as someone takes action, they are more committed to it. That's sort of a rule. Behavior has a big deal. So if you ask them who else you should contact, they now have some kind of commitment to you and your issue, and then thank the policymaker for the time. That is very important. I mean, that again, there are lots of demands on their time, and when they're going to meet with you, they are taking time from whatever something else of great, maybe not as important to you, but as important to them. And so you have to thank them for their time. Okay, and then there is, wait a minute, my cursor's not moving right. Okay. Then there's follow-up. The first thing is even though you've thanked them on your way out, you send a follow-up thank you note or email, probably email in this day and age. In that, you provide whatever additional information was asked for, or things that you think are important that you didn't get to in the meeting. And let them know you followed up on what they suggested. That is, you've contacted another congressperson, another person in, sometimes they say, I know Alan has said, it would be helpful if we had support from the state legislature, probably if you could get my assembly member is O'Donnell to contact me, that would be useful. There it is, that's useful. And so I would write in the thank you note, and I have an appointment with Assembly Member O'Donnell on whatever date. Then track what they are doing on that issue. Track their actions, and when they act, they vote, they co-sponsor, thank them. Send another email saying, I noticed that on HR 5, whatever, you voted in. I certainly appreciate your vote on HR 5. It was an important vote, and I know it was sometimes difficult for you to take that stand, but you thank them. And again, in keeping contact, invite the policymaker to appropriate events. Again, they may or may not show up. It doesn't matter. The invitation is what matters. And if they show up, make sure you introduce them from the audience, even if they don't have a chance to speak. The biggest part of the follow-up is to keep the relationship going. And so that's what I've got, but I think there were questions. I'm going to see if I can get back to the chat. I think people, end of slide.
Okay. Patty wants to know if she can go to the Cindy meeting.
I will ask the other two people who I'm going with. Yeah, I mean, I have no objection to it, but I'm one of three people going, and so I will ask them. I don't ever act on my own when I'm working with a group. That's, but yeah.
And basically I just need to get to know her. She's my councilwoman.
Yeah, no, I think that's very good. She is not mine, so it's good to have people who live in her district. And I will say that as well. This is a relationship building meeting. This is
Exactly.
not an ask meeting. So
No.
I doubt whether there'll be a problem, Patty, but I'll get back to you.
Thank you so much.
I got a question.
Yeah.
For follow-ups, should we also reiterate what we're advocating for, just so that they can remember who we are and like what we're trying to advocate for?
Oh yes, that's also communication 101. So it's tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. So that's the tell them what you told them. Absolutely, it's the wrap up point. Yes. And go back to the ask at that point. It's in a question. And it is, so can we count on you to do whatever it is you wanted them to do? And if the answer is, I'm still thinking about it, well, thank you. And if there's anything we can do to help, let us know. And then that goes into the thank you note as well. that you write afterwards. But yes, the wrap up, that's very good, Nico. Absolutely important. Any other questions or concern or comments? One of the great things, and I didn't make enough of this, but it is in terms of building the relationship with your allies and building coalitions. It's actually fun in its own weird. It can be very frustrating. I mean, I've been involved in this anti-war stuff forever, and it's very frustrating. On the other hand, I've made some of my best friends this way. I mean, they're people whose company I enjoy, and in preparing, you're spending time together. And I wouldn't say have wine when you go see them, but you could have wine or beer in the preparation time and have a good time with it. And I think it's, it is, it does feel it. It's fun in a way that makes you feel fulfilled, and there's a whole lot about purpose-driven life. Well, this can be part of the purpose of your life, in a very, very nice and uplifting way. And I don't want to sound too much like Pollyanna, but it is that, even in its frustration. It is that. So you'll find people, you meet people who are like you, when you get involved with advocacy, and that's always good. Anything else? No. Okay, Karen, I think I shot it.
Oh. Just a couple of things. What should you do when a meeting kind of goes off topic? You've got somebody that totally loses their point and just is going in totally in the wrong direction.
Well, this is, yeah. So I was using I was using Congressmember Lowenthal and Vice Mayor Richardson because those are, but there are two ways it can go off. One way is it can go off is that either someone in your group or the policymaker moves the conversation to something totally unrelated. If it's someone in your group, you can give them the evil eye and try to bring it back. You can be less subtle. If it is with the policymaker, then you have to think fast and figure out a way. What is the tie from what they're saying to what you're concerned about? And, well, that's a good point. And I think it's related to what we're concerned about because. And that's sort of, you have to be very polite about it and you have to think very fast. I've also been in a meeting with a policymaker who shall be unnamed, but he'll never get my vote again, in which there was a specific ask and it was around policing and a bill before a bill that was up, and he was awful. And as one of my colleagues in the meeting was trying to make the point again or make a new point around it, he slammed down his papers and said, "This meeting is over." And we left. Because there's nothing you can do at that point. I have to say that it was a woman who was trying to make the point, and when we got outside, this is a woman I had never heard curse in my life. And she went on at length. What was interesting is when I saw him at a big event, he came up to me and said, I ended up voting for that. And I said, yes, after it was watered down. I mean, I wasn't going to give him an inch at that point. Usually you say thank you, even if it's watered down, because we'll come back for something. But at that point, I wasn't going to give him an inch because he had been rude to us and I didn't care. and I don't know what, our relationship, he's always nice to me, and I think he thinks I'll come around. And I know I won't. But I smile, and when it's not on topic, I'm always nice to him. I can be nice.
Yeah.
There's another message here. Yeah, and I know he won't. Yeah, let me guess. Yes. Yes,
I
don't
think
worry.
it's the same assemblyman that he always comes to Gray Panther events that we invite him to. And his thing is, you don't want the Gray Panthers mad at you.
Right, exactly. And I think that's what I think he thinks about me too, because he also knows that I'm very active in a number of organizations, and I may have clout with my friends. I don't know how much clout I have with my friends, but it's okay for him to think that. I'm
Yeah.
perfectly comfortable with him thinking I have power.
Yes.
So,
And keep in mind, these people, a lot of people are afraid to talk to their legislators, but they work for you. They want your vote. So you have a right to express your opinion on a topic or to inform them. Don't assume that they're informed on the bills that they're voting on.
right.
Their staff may be, and they may not know anything that the bills that they're voting on, they just vote the way their staff tells them to vote.
Yeah, there was a point when I worked for the U.S. Department of Education at one point, and there was a point that in that part of my life that because you couldn't actually, because of the Hatch Act, have relationships with Congress themselves, but you could have some kinds of relationships with staff.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the issues that we did, I remember at one of our I was in research, and at one of our big research conventions, we did have somebody, not one of the government people, somebody else we worked with, one of our contractors, asked a congressman to come to be part of a panel. He's no longer he's no longer alive because this is a long time ago. He was the only librarian in Congress at the time, Major Owens from the Bronx in New York. And it was something that of concern to libraries. And he brought a staff person. And in the dinner before, I spent a lot of time with a staff person. And that was perfectly legal. And sometimes, particularly in Congress, the staff people are in some ways more powerful. There was a book, and I'm trying to think, I can't think of its name now, but talked about the iron triangle of the bureaucrats, which is what I was, and the staff people as part of this triangle. Oh, and the contractors. So that was the iron, and how that influenced legislation. And notice the Congress people weren't in that. They're not part of that iron triangle that was discussed. So yeah, staff will tell them, and sometimes it's good to know staff as well.
Always a good idea to be nice to everybody because the staff can also get you appointments with legislators.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Getting to know the scheduler is probably as important as anything. So there's a question: is it better to be an ally or in solidarity? It depends on Bill. I would say it depends on. I'm not sure that the definitions you put in are the ways I would put it, but I think it depends on the issue. If you want to be on some things, you want to say, yes, your issue, you stand in solidarity. Your issues are my issues. we will be together on everything. And on some issues, you want to say, I'm going to support your issues, but there are a couple of them I don't agree with, but don't worry, I'll never speak out against you. And I expect the same from you. I guess that's a contract that you will be with us on this issue. And I know you don't agree with us on that issue, but I don't want you to speak out against us. And I've made that deal on that kind of deal on a number of issues and concerns. I mean, it's the way it is. And again, it depends on the issue and it depends on the organization. And
Yes.
some organizations are easier to work with than others, I have to say, but.
Yeah, and as the Gray Panthers has over 72 different organizations that we partner with on different issues, I want to address the issue of subject experts. When we're looking at who to partner with, we want to know how truthful is the information that they're working from? Has there been research on the issue? Is it an accurate representation of the issue? And does it align with what our mission and our beliefs are? That's how we determine which partners we're going to work with. And our partners served as subject experts for the issues. Some of you were on a meeting Thursday, and a woman made some statements, and she kept trying to get time to speak to the Gray Panthers, and we kept asking what were the academic credentials, what made this person a subject expert, and we never got an answer, so we never let her speak. So as an organization, or if you're representing an organization, keep in mind that who you work with also impacts your credibility, because a partner can go and say that they're working with you and you can be working with them, but you may not have agreement on that issue. So you have to be careful who you partner with.
Any other questions? And I have switched the host back to you, Karen, just so you know. No other questions? Okay. Well, I'm not used to silence.
Well, we get engaged on some issues. So while Nada's still on the call, I wanted to, those of you that went to the meeting Thursday, did you find it interesting? I'd like to know.
Yeah, me
And
too.
did you learn something?
Is it the Long Beach Area Peace Network meeting?
Yes,
Yeah.
Nico.
Oh yeah, I love the meeting.
Oh,
It was
good.
actually really interesting learning about the different international humanitarian issues, because I'm not like that aware of like international issues as I should be, and I think it was really eye-opening for me.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm
Yeah.
glad.
And I mean, if you want to know more about international issue, I actually recommend John Bolton's book. He's come from kind of a different perspective. But we work with the Long Beach Area Peace Network. Some of the members were actually instrumental in helping start the Gray Panthers. And they're our partner on international peace issues. And we support, we don't always agree on the issues, but we support. So
This is, as a member of the Long Beach Area Peace Network, we're not always in agreement on the issues. We take votes. I mean, we don't have to come to consensus. We take votes, and you know, some you win and some you lose, and that's. But what sort of keeps us going is that even I've been on the losing side of a couple of them. It's like, okay, well, I lost that one, and do not expect me to speak to city council on that issue. Um, but
So I'm not going to stand up in the coastal commission and support you.
but I'm also, yeah, I mean, it's, that's it. And, since of all the people within that group, I probably have the widest relationship with city council, not necessarily the deepest. And so it's sort of like, oh, Nada, will you go? Well, no, I'm not. Not on this one, on something else, maybe. So.
And I really want to address too, I mean, there are people that make kind of outrageous statements and negative messaging
Yeah, what
about politicians, the city staff, and that's not a good way to build a relationship.
Well, and I want to, again, it is, you do your opposition research not to attack the people, but to understand their concerns. And you can attack those issues, but you never attack. I mean, that's really hard. It's really hard not to attack people on occasion, because some people are really awful.
And they deserve it.
And they deserve it. And you can do it over the wine before you go to your policymaker, but never, you stay on the issues. And you do it, not again how wrong they are, but here's a way to think about that differently. And that works much better, much better.
And we have an inside outside strategy. So we try to work inside, and you have to understand that sometimes city officials have a specific policy, and staff, even if they don't agree necessarily with that policy, they are doing what they're directed to do. So they don't always have a choice in that matter. So you have to take that into consideration when you're working with someone.
And I can say, so, and I did make a point about implementation. And as a former bureaucrat, I can say it. What bureaucrats can do, and I was both at a state level, not California, and federal level, bureaucrats are very able to slow things down. And so if they can't really act against a policy that's in place, but they can slow it down. And so if it's something of great importance to you, one of the things that you can say to the policymaker is, we're really concerned about implementation. Can you we don't see it happening. Maybe if you ask for a report from the city about this, we'll get some more action on it. That works. I mean, you haven't attacked anybody, but it doesn't seem to be happening at the speed that we thought it was going to happen. Could you check on that? And maybe a formal report will be helpful. And you'll see there are frequently city council members are asking for reports on progress. That's sometimes their own concern, and sometimes an advocate has come to them and said, would you? And it's something that they believe in, they will.
And public events are sometimes, well, they're not going out to many public events now, but they still go to some. Public events are really, most of the politicians that I've developed relationships with started via a public event.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And now I used to work for the Boys and Girls Clubs in LA, and all of the politicians come through the system. Xavier Becerra, I spent lots of hours when I worked at the Boys and Girls Club talking to Xavier Becerra because he was a graduate of the clubs. That's and he used to come to all the events. Antonio Villagrosa, I spent several dinners because actually nobody else would sit next to him.
Oh God, that's not.
and that happens too. So, don't be afraid to talk to people. You can start off by asking a question, whatever makes you comfortable, and know what issues. Like Alan Lowenthal is the chair of the Environmental Committee assignment in Congress. So he's very concerned about environmental issues. So he's always the first person that we go to for support on environmental issues. Lena Gonzalez, our state senator, fashions herself an environmentalist. She was one of the first people to bring forward a plastic bag ban in a city, eliminated styrofoam. So learn, as Nita said, what their interests are.
And I want to say, and just mentioning Senator Gonzalez. So here's how, and here's how public events can matter. A number of years ago, the Coalition for Good Jobs in a Healthy Community sponsored a public event, a panel discussion on making Long Beach a sanctuary city, which we were not at the time, bringing in people from other cities and having, she was then a council member, Gonzalez, on the council. And she was okay on the sanctuary city, but what we wanted more than that, we wanted a fund, a lawyer fund, a fund to provide legal help to anybody picked up by ICE. And that meeting changed her. There was a lot of, I mean, there was one sort of at the end, a whole lot of questions to her about that from throughout the meeting, for all over. I'm sure I was not part of the organizing of that, but I'm sure that was planned. And in the end, she actually co-sponsored the funding of the establishment of a legal fund. And she didn't go into that meeting for it. I mean, and she said it at the beginning of the meeting that or at her turn on the panel, that she wasn't for it. But given the questions and the level of interest, she changed. So that's a really big thing we used to do, and we will again. We haven't figured out how. The people state of the city, and they are in the back. We don't have any of the politicians speaking, but we know they're there. We do introduce them, by the way. We do say in the house, but they're in the back, and they hear the community concerns then. And it was always a big event, and it'll be a big event again when we can all be in the after time, when we can all be together again. We'll do something this year, but it won't be the kind of event we've had in the past. Clearly, I mean, we can't, but unless we want to kill everybody, which we don't.
Not now.
But that kind of big event, and the fact that I have to say, there's an article in Scientific American, this month's Scientific American, how social movements change policy. And that's got to do as much with demonstrations and building social movements in general as any of this kind of, that's another kind of advocacy. And that's why you come in coalition. You want to build the social movement. It's a good article. I just read it yesterday.
Is it in this month's?
It's in this month's Scientific American, yes.
And another reason you do public events, I went to one of Lena's public events when she was a council member. It was the opening of the new courthouse. And she introduced me to the organization that is in charge of managing the courthouse. And I went representing Partners of Parks, another nonprofit I work with. And I sent them a newsletter, and they made a donation, and this was like, what, 7 years ago. And they still to this day are donating on an annual basis on the basis of that one brief contact at that meeting.
Mhm. So it's not only meetings you organize, it's meetings organized by the policymaker as well. I mean, again, you show, you know, I don't want to quote him because he's a horrible person, but showing up is 90% of the game. And it is.
So if
Okay,
nothing,
I'm gonna leave if you're gonna go into your private business, I will leave. And Karen knows how to get in touch with me. I'm very available, to the world.
Nada's a wonderful resource.
Oh,
Thank you,
absolutely.
Karen.
Nada, I'm sorry. What is that article again from Scientific America?
I can't think, it's this month's and the title is How Social Movements Change Policy or
Okay,
something like that.
sure. Okay.
I mean,
Thank you.
No, this brain is an old brain. It's good, but it's not the way it used to be.
Thank you.
Anyway. Okay.
Thank you so much, Nada.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I will talk about leadership, which actually was one of the things I did academic research on. So that may be more boring than this.
Ever, you're never boring.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, Nada.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I want to talk a little bit about your projects, because at the next Sunday meeting, hi, honey, I want you to be prepared. We'll go around prepared to make a statement about your project, what you're doing. And then I already have takers for your door hanger, Nico. So I haven't had time to look at the change proof, but if it's okay, I'll let you know. Did you get estimates from the printer yet?
I think me and Ivy and Melinda sent the budget report, or at least the two bids, I think.
So which two? I'll look at it again. I don't remember which two you got the quotes from.
It was from two different sites. I think one was like
Zooprint, and I don't remember the other one.
Are they the overnight shippers?
I think it was just standard shipping.
Okay, so I just want you to be aware, because we're a social justice organization. When we pay to have work done, we try to use local vendors as much as possible. And with printers, believe it or not, a lot of people ship it off to foreign countries that they pay their workers almost nothing. So that's one of the reasons why we try to keep it local, and we want to support local Long Beach businesses. So I'll look at it and then we'll make a decision on where we're gonna get it printed, okay?
Okay, thank you.
So, and what we'll do is we'll hand them out every month at the senior center. 300 to 400 seniors come and pick up food boxes. So we'll hand them out. The cards, they do a drive-by. So I'm not going to have you do it. You can come and kind of sit and watch if you want, but I'll hand them out to the cars. They drive through, they check in, they get a form that says they're entitled to a food box. Then they drive up, pick the box, it gets thrown into their car. And when they sign in, I just hand them material is how that works. And then they just drive through. So there's not really direct contact except to hand them the flyer.
Also, quick question, Karen. So how many did you do you want us to have? Because we only prepared for 1,000, but I mean, we can update our budget report if you want more than that.
Well, we'll probably just do 1,000 right now because I'm not going into the buildings. Normally I would do 3,000 and we would take them to the senior buildings, but most of the senior buildings have COVID cases. So I'm not comfortable sending people out, and I'm not comfortable going into the buildings. So 1,000 I can hand out pretty easily. So we'll concentrate on the food programs at the senior center, because those are people that are already coming. And then I have a couple of buildings, and I'll hand them out in my building too. And because that way I can get direct feedback on how useful people think. Generally the door hangers work really well. And then generally I walk around my neighborhood and I put them on doors and gates and the apartment buildings too. So that they're pretty easy to hand out. So you got your project. And if you haven't prepared your project outline yet, please finish that this week. If you don't know the information, leave it blank and I'll send you an email about it. It's not important that you have every detail, but I do want to see your budget too. So if there's any costs. Now, if you have costs associated with their project, there is some money through the Center for Community Engagement. You can talk to your instructor if there's costs. Say you decided you really personally wanted to do 2,000 door hangers. So maybe the Gray Panthers would pay for half of it, and the Center for Community Engagement would pay for the other half of it. But so there is money available to pay for costs if you have costs associated with your project. Oh, Nada didn't stop the recording. Okay, so next week we will talk about the projects, and I'm gonna have to figure out how much time. So please keep them to 10 minutes because we have so many. And I've been asked to take some more students. So I don't know when I feel badly because students have to have internships to graduate. And it's like, I can't take it. One organization took over 150. So I certainly can't do that. So, I mean, and I'm pretty maxed out depending on what happens with the timekeeping. So your timekeeping, just keep your sheets. If you have to load them in S4, I don't know if they can be uploaded or they'll have to be transferred, but I'll have an answer for you next Sunday as to how that's going to work. It looks like everybody that I've seen a timesheet for, you're doing really great work. And the instructor was really pleased with everybody figuring out their steps, and was really pleased with the work that she'd seen so far. So thank you for that, for doing the work. And I told her how wonderful you all were. So she was very pleased so far.
Hi,
Kate?
Karen. So could you repeat the date of when the presentation is? Because I think on the original agenda,
The syllabus.
the syllabus is that the presentations are on March 18 or the 25th. So I just wanted to clarify that so we can prepare.
No, because your internships go to May, the first part of May.
Right.
So, and I need to adjust that. So it'll be usually it's the last 2 weeks of the internship time period, depending on how many interns we end up with and how much time we need. So usually we get them all done in two sessions. Now, I think we'll be able to do that. And we'll also talk next week about your interviews, because you're going to have to start preparing your interview question. Remember, you have to interview an older adult. So start getting some ideas on what you want to know about older adults for your interviewee.
Hi, Karen. I'm sorry, I had a question about the older adult interviews.
Uh-huh.
And I was just wondering, when we do the interview, did you want us to do like a presentation about the interview and our results? Or did you want us to make a video just so we know kind of to prepare?
Well, I'd like to have an interview if you have the capability of doing that. We discovered last semester that a lot of the students did not have a capability of doing video. I mean, you can do it on your phone. You don't really need a lot of equipment to do it. So yes, what I want to do is kind of start kind of a digital archives of older adults in Long Beach. So
Okay.
I'm looking for, I have a photographer that I've been talking about. We've been talking about art projects. And then at the senior center, they have a lot of wall space. And we're talking about doing galleries. And I've done art exhibits where you hang, the digital photo frames on the wall and had the stories roll on the frames. So these people are valuable and their stories are important. We want to start working on trying to preserve their stories so that we can share them with other people.
Wait, Karen, I just want to clarify for the presentations. So is it going to be on the same date it is on the original syllabus, or would it be on a different day?
It's, I think, going to be on a different date.
Okay.
But I'll send you an updated syllabus out because I have to send them out for all the new people too. So I'll make that change. I believe it's the last 2 weeks in April that we're going to do the presentations.
Okay.
Also, one more question, adding on to, I think someone was talking about the interview with the older adults. So you wanted it to be recorded, or is it okay if we kind of like just type out like as they're speaking to us? Because I'm not sure if some, the people I'm interviewing would be comfortable being recorded.
And that's okay. You can, whatever you have the capability of doing that makes everybody comfortable. And I will send you, I'll develop a release form. We have one, just make an alteration, make sure it includes video. And then do it however they feel comfortable. Because we can put the people that aren't interested, don't want to be recorded. And I can understand that some people wouldn't want to be recorded. We can put their stories in a notebook and make that available. And I'm thinking for research for future students. So. Okay, any other questions?
Hi, Karen. I have a question. So my professor is requiring us to fill out a mid-semester evaluation,
Yes, thank
and
you.
it's due this week. So I don't know if can I send it to you tonight or tomorrow morning? That way you can fill it out.
Yes, anybody that has, I talked to your instructor about this. So she's gonna give me 10 days. So I don't want anybody to panic about it. But if you send me the form, I try to turn them around pretty quickly on the mid-semester. And then she's sending me both the mid-semester one, and there's gonna be a final evaluation too. So that's why it's important for you to participate in these discussions so I can see how smart you are, so I know what to put on your evaluation forms.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I do save the documents that I do on you. So if you send me an email a year out and saying, hey, I was an intern, I need a letter of recommendation for such and such a job, I can write you a really effective recommendation letter. Most of the people that I write recommendation letters for end up getting the position that they're applying for. So I have an intern. She's one of the first interns I had. She was like 4 years ago. And she's now a program director at Christian Outreach and Action. And I got her the job because I knew the woman and was able to make a phone call. So that's where that value comes in. And that's why I like to have the things in the S4, because if my computer crashes, I still have access to the information on what you worked on. So as long as I'm alive, I can write you a letter of recommendation.
Karen, just a random question. A couple of us have Philip Falsetti. I was just wondering if you had a chance to talk to him yet.
I'm sorry, for who?
Professor Philip Falsetti.
No, I have not. Can you send me his name and I'll call him or send him an email?
Okay, I think he'll reach out to you, but I think we're gonna meet with him in like 2 weeks, so I'll ask him then.
Okay. Because I'm happy to talk to any of the professors. A lot of the, because I guess the internship requirement is kind of fairly new. So they had a record number of professors sign up. This year is one of the reasons why they're having so many problems. Because there's a lot more professors that asked for internships that were at the orientation session where they went over everything. So, and some of the professors I haven't worked with before. So yes, I do like to make that personal connection with the professor. And I try and send them a lot of the materials I send to you so they can see exactly what we're doing in terms of the process and what you're exactly going to learn. Then I just wanted to remind you, there is no city council meeting this week. If you don't live in Long Beach, you don't have to listen to a Long Beach City Council meeting. If you live in another city, you can listen to your own city's city council meeting, and that counts. And Nico brought up an activity that it was outside Long Beach and it didn't specifically involve seniors. Anything that you do that specifically relates to seniors, older adults, counts as credit. So if you go have lunch with your grandparents and have an in-depth conversation, that would count towards your hours. If you go talk to the neighbors who are older adults, that counts for hours. There are some, Nico asked for a list of meetings. I'm trying to finish up the newsletter, and I sent you some links to some meetings, but there are other meetings going on this week too. I haven't had time to open up my email this morning, and I had 3,100 email messages. So I haven't had time to go through all of them and see which meetings would be relevant. I know there is another technology meeting, and Ryan, I'll send you that. I'm sorry, first one. I think it's tomorrow at 4, but I'll have to check.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about budgeting more, because I sent you the chart. In March is when all the government entities start really in detail working on their budgets. So, and homework is to look at the state budget and to see where there might be some gaps on what's in the budget. Actually, Newsom did a pretty good job on, he actually put money into the budget for implementing the master plan on aging. This is one of the processes that governments go through. They develop these plans and then they never fund them, so they never get implemented. And this budget year is going to be very, very tight because of the COVID money. And nobody really knows how much money is going to be coming to the states through the federal government. So it's gonna be a fight for every dollar. And we were active on budget advocacy with Long Beach Rising Coalition, and we were able to successfully keep senior programs funded at the level. There were no cuts when they were cutting every department 10 to 13%. They didn't cut the senior programs. And we actually got more money added to the youth program. So this is where that advocacy work comes in important. You get to do some of that with the budget planning this year, because we're going to have to monitor all those budgets carefully to make sure that they don't cut vital programs for seniors. The food program, particularly concerned about food access, transportation. There's a lot of discussion going on transportation. The bullet train money. There's some people that want to do totally away with the bullet train. So in that money, and at one point the state was asked for some of that money back by the federal government because they hadn't built enough of the bullet train. So these are all going to be some tough issues. You know, in LA County Metropolitan Transit is trying to implement a major changes to the transit system to make transportation more available and inclusive to all areas of the county. And it looks like there's not going to be enough money to do everything that was originally planned. So there's probably going to be a big fight for money there. Housing, we're working with Everyone In, a program of United Way. Measure H got passed, which Measure J, which cut money from the police department to be redistributed to nonprofits. That's another budget issue. And I'll let you know when that next meeting is. And then H is housing, the building of affordable housing. Affordable housing is becoming a really hot issue. There's a lot of discussion going on around affordable housing. So there'll be some advocacy issues around there. And I know a couple of you are going to do your project on housing. Housing is a huge issue for this area in our state because it is so expensive. We have the highest rates of poverty and the highest rates of unhoused people in the United States. So budget, we're going to be talking a lot about the budget. Okay. And there will be a budget presentation, I think sometime in March. What happens with the city is the mayor comes out with his budget proposal first. And then the city council members look at it. They have to approve the budget. And the city manager has to weigh in. The city manager has the right to make changes. He actually prepares the budget and the mayor adds his changes to it. And then the city council has to adopt it. They usually hold hearings over the summer. They had them online and they didn't really have the technology to support really robust meetings. So some of the meetings last year weren't very good, although, you know, we did get to testify and we were able to keep the cuts from seniors and youth. So, and that's something as part of the budget process that we're going to have to look at is what are new programs? I want the sidewalks fixed. You know, the city lost a lawsuit that requires them to spend, I think it's $11 million a year on fixing sidewalks and curb cuts. They had actually a friend of mine worked for, he was disabled and he worked for a company that went around and did assessments if buildings were accessible for a nonprofit, that's what they do. and he was a party to a lawsuit that the city lost. So the city has to spend $11 million per year on fixing curbs to make them accessible. They had to hire an outside consulting firm that went around and measured all the curbs, and like 92% of the curbs were not labeled as accessible. So right now that hurts the budget, having to shell out that $11 million. So this is why it pays to do things right the first occasion. So curb cuts in the sidewalks. I had a friend who, the sidewalks downtown are what they call stamped brick, but they're just square cinder block tiles, and the trees lift up the blocks, so they're very easy to trip on, and people trip on them all the time. I've tripped 3 times. I had a friend that tripped and broke his wrist and sued the city and won. So these are things that need to be fixed. So we'll see what the city proposes. And I know one of the things I'm personally interested in, not cutting parks. And not cutting senior programs, because people are so dependent upon those programs. Okay, so anything else? So I will send you email meetings.
I have an announcement to make, if that's okay, Karen. So for the new interns, or for those who aren't already in the Discord that I made. So for my last project that I did, I made a Discord, and now I'm just using it for like the interns to communicate with each other if they have any questions. So I'll just drop the link in the chat if anyone else wants to join. I also created a role called the Remind Me role. That Ivy is kind of like helping out with, and making sure that people are reminded about the meetings that are going on every week. So yeah.
Okay, great. That's great.
And Karen, just to confirm, you're gonna send the meetings to us?
I'm going to send you a list of meetings this week. And then I'm recording these meetings, and I'm going to get them posted on the Gray Panther website. So probably I have to, when you record the meeting, it's not, you have to download it, and it has to translate it. So, and it takes a while to do that. So I'll have to do that and then send it to our person that posts things up on our website. So, and I'll try and do that this week. And I'll get the one from NADA. It recorded to the web. It might not be as hard to get that posted. But I'll try and do that. And the intention is to get them all recorded eventually, so that people can go back and reference them. The intention, I'll try and do the grant writing class again this week, because I have some other people that want to watch that. So, and I'll try and have that done by the end of the semester. So I'll let you know when that happens. And I know I'm forwarding a lot of emails because it's just easier for me to forward them sometimes. But the computer I used at Partners of Parks crashed last week. So I've had to move some stuff around and make some changes. Okay, and just everybody's got the reading list, and I've got some people that signed up to do internships, and I've not heard a word from them, and they aren't attending the meetings. But those of you that are attending, I do check off that you've done everything so that I know that you completed all the steps. So, I mean, it's not mandatory, but I do check off and you get a little gold star when you attend. And if you go to a meeting and I'm on the meeting, I make note of who attends those too. So, and there's no penalty if you start to listen to a meeting and it doesn't interest you, or you think that you have something better to do with your time. There's nobody's feelings hurt if you drop off, including these meetings. Okay, I want to make sure you're getting value for your time. And then there is a Gray Panther meeting coming up March 6th for those of you that haven't had a chance. I want you to get kind of a feeling for how all these different organizations operate and understand that there's not one way to run a meeting, that there are lots of different meetings depending upon I know the Long Beach Area Peace Network, sometimes the meetings are really challenging for me because I don't agree with a lot of what some of the people say. No. But I respect their right to have an opinion. Although last weekend I was getting really upset. It's hard for me to keep quiet when people are just way out there. So I have to be careful what I do. So, and I do try to offer some kind of rational explanation why I do that. I had to do that with the guy on the bus. I had 2 friends die within 4 weeks of each other from COVID because people came around them and weren't wearing masks. So it's important to me that everybody wears a mask. Okay, so
Hey.
those
Oh.
of you that want to come to the meeting tomorrow, I sent you the notice already, and then we are going to talk about advocacy. We'll go deeper in the budget, and we're going to talk about the legislative calendar, so I will send you that. There is a cycle. I want you to understand the cycles. So if you're going to lobby for something, you know when it's the most effective time. If the budget process starts in March, you want to be thinking about what you want to ask for prior to March, not wait till March to figure out what it is you want to ask for. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tomorrow. What have you seen that seniors need that maybe is something that we should be lobbying for over this budget cycle? So that's what the meeting tomorrow night will be about, if you care to attend. Okay?
Hey, Karen, quick question.
Yes. Excellent.
So my name is Axel. This is pretty much like my first Zoom meeting that I'm attending. So I just want to like check in and like kind of like know what exactly what's going on.
Thanks. Well, this is kind of, these meetings on Sunday evenings are kind of a big part of the internship. This is the 4th one, I think. So I'm trying to get them recorded and up on the Gray Panthers website so people can access them outside of the meetings. I'm going to send you some more documents so that you have the documents that everybody has, because I have so many interns and people are starting at all different times. You're not the only new person. There are a couple of others, and I'm still getting requests. So catch up, and if you ask questions, the requirements are that you attend some of these meetings. It's absolutely up to you how much you want to learn. and what you participate in. The overview is to give you an idea of what it's like to be an older person and to understand the processes around how policy and services are decided and delivered. So whatever fields you go into, you be able to advocate for policy that is helpful for whatever field you want to go into. Most of the students are from one class, and it's a health education class. So I don't believe in putting pressure or deadlines. There's no, this is to help you grow and to kind of be compatible with your classroom experience, give you more real life experience as to how things actually work. So we do that by trying to educate you on nonprofits, which we did last week, which I can get that online too. How nonprofits work within the structure and how government systems create and fund policies so that you understand that. So you understand how citizens can impact the policy if they don't like it in a positive way to make a positive change. So you're in health education too, aren't you, Axel?
No, I'm not actually.
Oh.
So I come from community psychology.
Okay. So are you planning on working with the older people?
Well, yeah, it is pretty interesting. It brought my attention, and to be sincere with you, your organization is pretty much the only one that has reached out to me from the other four that I tried to get in contact. This is the only one that I got in contact with.
So I'll send you the whole setup. So it's essentially these classes. I also do sessions on Monday night, except for when there's a 3-day holiday. But the sessions on Monday dive kind of deeper into an issue. You definitely are going to want to learn everything you can about advocacy because there's not enough mental health services. This is one of the issues that are absolutely critical for older people. You know, I'm having trouble dealing with 2 people dying in 4 weeks, and one of them exposed me to COVID. And I had a question whether or not the second one did or not. And actually, I'm going to a meeting with a grief therapist on Tuesday. So I live in a 183 unit senior building on 7th and Pacific. It's a big, tall building. And there's over 200 people living in the building. And we're one of the few senior buildings. There are 34 of these senior buildings in the city. They're paid for by the Housing and Urban Development Department of the federal government. They're like a Section 8 voucher, but the voucher is attached to the unit. It's not attached to the person. So it's subsidized housing. So I pay 30% of my income. I'm trying to live on my Social Security. And dealing with the issues. There are some people that are so afraid to leave their apartment. Some people have underlying health issues, so they're afraid to go out. And this is a huge piece because seniors are just such an expanding part of the community. This is a huge issue. And seniors consume the most healthcare resources. So it's important that services be delivered in a way that is cost effective and kind of at the point of where they live or where they can get to. I have a neighbor who's housebound. She's in a wheelchair. And her health provider keeps calling her and asking when she is going to come get her vaccine. And she keeps telling them, well, she's not comfortable going out with access or any service to get there because they won't wait for her. She has to call and schedule an appointment, and you don't know how long it's going to take. So some of the expectations are not very realistic. So she hasn't gotten vaccinated, and she's in hospice for breast cancer. So she's certainly somebody that should be vaccinated quickly. So a lot of seniors have disabilities, and the state put the disabled community in the lowest category for vaccine approval. So we helped advocate with some other partners to get handicapped people, disabled people moved up in the priority status. So they got moved up just this past week to with the 65+ year olds. So that's an issue. But the mental effects that it's having on older adults, I mean, some of them just people are just suffering so much from depression. You know, I stay in my house as much as I can, but I can only take so much time of being confined, and then I have to get out. But I don't have any underlying health issues. I'm pretty healthy. I'm 70 years old and I don't take any medication. You know, like my neighbor, she's taking like 23 medications. So declining. I know the men, I talk to a lot of people in my building, and the men seem like they're really depressed, but they're not going to talk about it. And there's 11 different languages spoken in my building, so there's language barriers also. And then I interact with other senior buildings, although I've had to cut that back because they've actually had death from COVID in the 2 buildings that are closest to me, that I used to do a lot of work in them. So there's a lot of psychology issues. So the other requirements for the internship are that you interview an older person, and that you create a personal project. There's no hour requirements, whatever fits in with whatever you want to do. And it's just something that you're interested in, a topic, but it has to be related to older adults. Okay, there's no tasks or quiz or anything. I ask for homework. That's just to make sure that you understand the concepts that we talked about in the session, that you've got a grasp on them and that you understand how to apply them.
Quick question.
Yeah.
For the interview, like, do we have to specifically interview like an elderly person that lives in Long Beach?
No, they don't have to live in Long Beach.
Okay, perfect. Because I do not live in Long Beach. I live right next to it, but not in Long Beach. And then to be sincere with you,
Don't live in Long Beach. So
and to be
I've had students interview like the grandparents that lived in Mexico. The idea is that you see what you can learn from older adults.
I see. Okay, so that's good then. So where I live, I noticed that pretty much the population of my apartments where I live, there's not really like a lot of elderly people, but I believe I do have a good place. I am currently working as a salesman at an appliance warehouse at Orange County. And then I mean, pretty much apart from, selling appliances, what I do is that most of the time I'm talking to a lot of people. And most of the population in which is Westminster City, there's a lot of elderly people.
Yes, and there's a lot of Cambodians in Southeast.
Yes.
Yeah. And are you bilingual, Axel?
Yes, I am.
In what language?
Spanish, fluent Spanish and English.
So it doesn't have to be a long interview. It's just you're going to have to come up with the questions. We're going to talk about that next week, what the questions, because give you some framework on the questions, some things that you'll want to know. I mainly want to capture the stories of how older people ended up where they ended up. And I work, the Long Beach Great Panthers, Sharon, we work out of the Partners of Parks office at the Long Beach Senior Center. So, and we're trying to develop more arts programming, and they just built a new computer lab. It's not open to the public yet, that we want to teach older people to video each other so that they can capture these stories too. And we're working on trying to get a radio show going. We actually have an agreement to do 13 episodes of an hour show with the Long Beach Public Radio Network. So that might be a project you'd be interested in, coming up with a format for a question show and deal with the public health issues.
Oh yeah, I for sure indeed. I mean, it is pretty interesting topic, and not only interesting, but it's crucial, you know.
So now, and there's people working on it.
I mean, I'm not sure if you like heard about what happened in Japan, that there was more suicide deaths than COVID kills, you know. So it is something really crucial in mental health.
And Japan is far ahead of where the US is at in the way they treat their elders. There's a lot more reverence and respect. Okay, so I sent you the link for Monday too. So we'll talk about Advocacy Monday. We do a lot of talking. And then
that's fine.
And then Nada does this one, and she does one on leadership development too. That's also very good. And then I have Myron Woolen, our president, who's coming in March, and he'll talk about labor unions and why labor unions are important. So I bring in outside speakers, as I'm trying to get a council member to come speak too. So we'll see. So as long as you feel like you're getting something out of this, you're more than willing to participate. Who's your professor that you're doing the internship under?
Yes, so my professor is Andrew Lohman.
Okay.
And then he teaches the two courses that I believe that he teaches right now is going to be community psychology and social psychology.
Okay. Because I'll send him some paperwork too, so he can see what we're doing and see if that means he's okay with the needs.
Okay.
What, because I have a syllabus. I haven't sent you the intro docs yet, and I'll send those to you too in the morning. Okay, and I have to go because I'm running out of internet.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. All right. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Good night.
Karen, good night.
Thanks, Karen.
Appreciate you all.